And welcome to another episode of What I Wish I'd Known, the Google Partners podcast, with me, your host, Alex Langsher. Regular listeners of the podcast will know that I like to come back and revisit subjects and themes periodically. We've looked at the issues of talent management, sales, client management, personal performance, growing your agency, etc. in past podcasts. Lately, I've been focusing on innovation and more specifically, the role of innovation in driving personal, professional, and business growth. The angle that I'm particularly interested in is how to make such a squishy and often talked about subject like innovation more practical. What exactly is innovation? Why does it matter? And how can we use it, regardless of the context or size of our company, to drive and create value? For this podcast, I want to speak to someone who has really lived the innovation agenda, someone who has transformed themselves and their career by making a conscious decision that innovation wasn't just something that they would talk about, but rather put into practice in their career and daily lives. Enter Michelle Greenwald, CEO of Inventours. Michelle got bit by the innovation bug hard. She founded DigitalLatest, which is a conference that's designed to bring marketing execs together to understand the latest in the digital marketing landscape. She runs innovation days with insight-generating safaris for blue-chip clients around the world. And she is steeped in marketing, having been SVP of New Products at Disney, VP and GM at Pepsi-Cola, business director at Nestlé, and prior to that, she was an account exec at JW Thompson, managing clients such as Kraft, Northern Trust Bank, and Abbott Labs. In addition to all this, she teaches marketing at Columbia, NYU Stern, Cornell Johnson, and other graduate schools. She's also a regular columnist for Forbes magazine, and as if that weren't enough, she's also, in typical overachiever fashion, written a book called Catalyzing Innovation, where she advocates systemic approaches to fostering new thinking in organizations of all sizes. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the podcast, Michelle.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on.
Great. Well, Michelle, before we begin, I'd really appreciate getting a little bit of your backstory. Like, what led you to found your current business at Inventours, and how did you get there?
Well, I have been teaching, as you know, taught in Spain at IESE Business School, which is ranked number one in the world in executive education by the Financial Times for the last 4 years. It's a wonderful school. And the chairman of the marketing department co-wrote a Harvard case about Ferran Adrià, who's considered the most creative chef who ever lived. And I was very taken by how he innovated and the lessons that corporations, large and small, can learn from how he innovates. And that was the purpose of the case. I've written about it. And Ferran, just as an example, recently signed a deal with Telefonica. He's their international ambassador and helps them innovate on telecommunications. And he also recently signed a deal with Grifols, which is a very large company in the healthcare space, applying his cooking methods to hematology research. And I just love the idea of cross-pollinating ideas from one sector to another. Additionally, I've taken exec MBA groups from NYU Stern to China, to Hong Kong, Beijing, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, and the students observe what's going on in those countries, and they come up with new business ideas that are either needed in those countries or in the US. And it's fascinating to me to see how 60 exec MBAs who observe the same company meetings come up with radically different ideas. And I just became very obsessed with the innovation process and really want to give new tools to companies so that they can innovate in a more methodical and creative way.
Well, so that really begs this pretty simple question, and I'm looking forward to hearing your answer to it. But Michelle, maybe you can just kind of crystallize for us, why does innovation matter?
Innovation matters today because you can't survive without it. There's not a company out there that doesn't have to innovate. I use an example of a dish company that sells like plates at Williamsburg and Thomas Jefferson's home, Monticello, and the company owners have told me that every time they go into the buyer says, "What's new?" And I can't think of a category that's more traditional than that. You go to Zara and H&M. It used to be that fashion came twice a year for spring, summer, and fall, winter. And now every single week there's new stuff in the stores for people to look at. Avon updates their catalog every 3 weeks to keep new users coming back and looking and coming onto the site. So brands innovate to keep relevant to consumers. If they don't innovate, competition will leapfrog them. Also, by innovating, they can enter new markets. They can add value and charge a higher price. If you look at Apple, people are willing to pay a higher price in part because of innovation that they bring. Also in marketing, innovation can help you get noticed and break out of the competitive clutter. And also innovation can make your customers more loyal because they love, you keep them engaged because you keep doing new creative things that are consistent with the brand.
Well, I want to come back to this. So you gave a number of examples, but let's think about our agency audience here. How would you say for them that innovation matters? I mean, other than the creative side, which quite clearly we understand that, and new and fresh ideas are really important, but from the operations of the business and the structuring and growth of the business and the client management, how would you say innovation matters there?
I think it matters tremendously because clients look to agencies to be, in many cases, more creative than they are. And so they want new ideas that are going to engage consumers. So I've worked at 13 different ad agencies and was an account executive at JW Thompson. And every single creative brief starts with, I want to break out of the clutter. And in order to break out of the clutter and get noticed, you need to be creative. You need to be consistent with the brand strategy, but you need to engage consumers by being clever and different and to get attention. So I think it's completely vital to what agencies do that they bring creativity and innovation to their clients.
As you know, the premise of the podcast is what you wish you'd known. So my question to you is, what would be the top 5 strategically tactical actions or thoughts that you would tell your younger self if you're trying to leverage innovation concepts to grow your business, your career, or just personal development?
Well, one thing, I've been very lucky because I've also been a judge and a mentor to entrepreneur programs. And I've been a mentor to many entrepreneurs at Columbia and Cornell and NYU and wherever I've taught. And several of my students have become multimillionaires. And if I look at who has succeeded and why, it's the students who were incredibly curious and they weren't afraid to share their ideas and they sought feedback. And this is something that anybody can do, whether you're a large company or a small company, is look for experts who can offer insights that you don't have. I think it's totally vital.
So, I mean, the common thread often is, if you've got a great idea, nurture it, grow it, but keep it quiet. So you're saying the exact opposite?
I am saying the exact opposite. Ideally, maybe you have patents to protect it, but frankly, nobody can execute it the way you can execute it. And if you can get to market relatively quickly and do it in a creative way, I don't think you need to be as concerned with being copied as with making big mistakes because of being ignorant. There are so many different aspects of new product development, getting distribution, legal issues, getting financing. It's impossible for anyone to know them all, and any one area can really trip you up. And so I think that if you don't get feedback, you're going to fail, in my opinion. So I say take the risk. It's worth it.
And if we link this back to innovation, you're saying you got a great idea, kind of like bake it a little bit, but then as soon as you feel that you're ready to bring it to the world or bring it to others, do so.
Yes, because you just need to start. You need to get out there, even if it's not as successful as you would like. I've had numerous experiences where I thought I had the greatest idea in the world and the core was a great idea. But by getting out there, getting reactions to it and getting experience, I was able to build on it. Had I not taken action, nothing would have happened. So it's very scary to launch your product. And there's a poster in Facebook that I love, and it says that done is better than perfect. And I think many times innovators, they're just waiting, if I just wait a little bit longer, it'll be better in this way, or my website will be better, or my price point will be better. But sometimes you just have to get out there and get started and get feedback.
Great. Well, what would be your second point?
My second point is related to the first one, but don't be afraid of losing face to some extent. That you might want to appear to be a great success in the beginning, but very few people really hit it out of the ballpark initially. Even the people we know that have been the most successful in hindsight, like Walt Disney or Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs or Jack Ma, all of them struggled and had failures along the way. They were very smart. They persevered. They had a vision and were able to bring people along with their vision, but nobody has had it made where everything went smoothly. So don't be afraid. The key thing is that you learn from your mistakes. There's a very good book about Israel called Startup Nation, and they trace a lot of Israel's serial entrepreneurship to the fact that they tend to question everything, both from the religious teachings of the Talmud and also from their military operations. They have a culture of post-mortem analysis. And it's something that a lot of Western cultures don't do enough of. And it's really, really critical that you try and understand and don't look at failure as a complete failure, but what can you gain out of it? And there's also a trend in product development, and this applies to agencies, it applies to small companies, to everybody. Fail early, fail small. Instead of waiting to have your finished product and months and finally putting it out there for the first time, do lots of little tests along the way so you can keep improving and you can keep iterating. And that's something that goes back to what I was saying before, that you really need feedback in order to iterate, or you don't know what to fix.
So, Michelle, the idea of failing and failing small is not really a new idea. I mean, I think there was even a magazine called Failure, and I think it did fail, but it's been around for a while. So if we think about as an agency, and maybe on the smaller side of an agency, or regardless of the size of the agency, if you look at the news, and most of them are kind of razor thin margins, it's a tough business to be in some cases. So lots of side cash and time to do projects which are maybe difficult. So can you suggest how one of our listeners may be able to apply some of these concepts that you're talking about?
Sure. I think a great example is the digital agency Huge, Huge. They have had several cases written about them, Harvard Business School cases, and it centers around the way they are organized in teams. So rather than having people sit in silos, the user interface and content person and creative and analytics and account people all sit together at the same table. And every day, 85% of what they do is what they did the day before, but 15% is new that they're experimenting with. And so every morning at 10 a.m., they turn around and they look at what they did, what worked, and what they should do the next day. I know there was a quote I saw a while ago from, I think it was the chief operating officer of Ogilvy and Mather, who said that 15% of your budget, of every brand's budget, should be experimental marketing, and that's testing. So I agree with you. An agency is not going to want to put all their eggs in a major campaign that they've never tested before, but there's really no excuse for getting some feedback that can educate you to reduce the risk.
Yeah, and certainly in the current landscape, there's the ability to do a lot of these experiments at scale using optimization tools, which enable you to throw out a number of different creative ideas and approaches and see what the market reacts to. So, the idea that you're saying on an individual and personal level, I get it. And it also applies directly into the agency space with a lot of the digital tools that are available.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Michelle, what would be your next point?
My next point is that everybody in the firm can innovate, whether they are the administrative assistant or the janitor or whomever. I really believe that good ideas can come from anywhere. And by letting the entire organization know that you value their ideas and providing a mechanism for them to contribute them, I think organizations can become stronger. It's very incentivizing. It's great for morale, but also I think a lot of good ideas can come from anywhere. And so what I like to do, my book is about it, and I gave a TEDx talk on the subject, is to train literally people to go out and find innovation every day all around them. They don't need to take a big trip. They don't need to necessarily take a course. My book is very inexpensive. It's $15, but it goes through 63 different ways that companies innovate all around the world across sectors. And I know now it's trained my brain that every single day I find new ways of innovation that fits into the 63 categories. And companies can create their own categories. So whatever works for them. I've even my interns, they say that I've changed the way they view the world. And so if companies let their employees know that they value their ideas and the types of innovations that they should be on the lookout for. Now it's so easy to capture them with Instagram, with photos, with hashtags, with Slack. There's just a lot of ways. But one of the keys is, one, letting the organization know that you want everybody to bring new ideas in, and then organizing them in a way that they can be found by category later on. And then when it's time to innovate on merchandising or on packaging or customer experience, you can look at all the great ideas that the whole organization has brought in.
So Michelle, let's say you're going into an organization, into an agency, and you're being asked to come in and help them to create an innovation process in the organization and to unlock the potential for innovation. What would you tell people from the receptionist to the accounts payable people to the creative people to the executives? What is the direction that you give them? Because my thought immediately goes to, if I'm just walking around trying to look for examples of innovation, I'm not really sure what I'm looking for or how. So how do you focus people so that they're doing something that's going to lead to a productive outcome? Like what is the direction that you give people?
Okay, well, as examples, I've been asked I do these innovation safaris where I bring people, like Michelin did one they were very interested in customer experience. And so we said, okay, go out there. We broke people into teams. A couple of groups went to visit stores like the Apple store, the Sony store, the Microsoft stores. Others went to look at apparel retailers, luxury apparel retailers. Others went to Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. So they looked at different channels, and they were looking at customer experience. So they had a focused lens. Or another company was looking at merchandising innovation, and another company was looking at craft sodas. So they go around literally looking in the street in everyday life for what is innovative in that area. It can be merchandising, it can be packaging, it can be price point. So I tend to do these themed safaris where the area that they want to improve on, they're going out and looking in the market. Another thing that I do is I give people an Instagrammability feature. Instagrammability to me is now one of the most important marketing metrics out there. It's really parallel to breaking out of the clutter. But I send people, again, on these safaris, and it could be customer experience or materials or merchandising. And I say, of everything that you saw, what would you take a picture of that was worth sharing with someone, and what would you say in that photo? So that's a way of, again, getting people focused on what's really working, what's breaking out of the clutter. And then the brand strategy part is, who are they trying to appeal to? What did it say about the brand? Was it reinforcing the right image? So I have people come back after they've gone on this hunt and taken pictures, and they look at how that fit with strategy and how did it further the brand.
I think the concept of Instagrammability, like something that I'd be willing and wanting to share with my friends and write a caption about, great idea. How do I bring that back into the organization and from there start to crystallize what we want to do?
It's a great question. So senior management, and I really believe it has to come from senior management, because unless that happens, I think the organization doesn't take it seriously, but needs to say, okay, we know that these are the areas we're weak in. We want to improve, and tell everybody in the company, these are the 5 areas. So my book has 63 different types of innovation. I don't ask companies to try and do 63 things at a time because it's impossible. But what are the 5 areas that you think are really important that you're not doing as well as you can? And then tell everybody in the company, okay, I want you to bring back examples of this. And then everybody sends in, but you need a centralized place to do it. You need to put someone in charge of collecting all the information. But in a way, nowadays, you can do it somewhat easily with types of hashtags so that they're all grouped together. And again, that next time you want to go look at merchandising innovation or materials innovation or color innovation or price point innovation, you've got a whole bunch of stimuli in one place that you can go through. It's almost like a library of ideas related to that particular area that you want to improve in.
What would be your next point, Michelle?
That I think a great way to innovate for any brand and even for individuals personally is to do a brand equity assessment. And give you an example. Ben & Jerry's is one of my favorite examples to use. I look at what are the things that Ben & Jerry's is known for. And it's known for dairy, it's known for ice cream, it's known for ice cream parlors, it's known for Vermont. And each one of the brand equity elements can be a point of departure for brainstorming new products and services or potentially ways to market. And so I do this with almost everything. When a brand looks to expand, I teach new products and entrepreneurship and innovation. And year one, the people are developing a core concept. But then every brand, in order to grow, looks to extend over time. And so what are you going to do next, when, and why? And so part of that is understanding what are you to begin with? What are your strengths? What has mass appeal in terms of the equity elements that you have? What makes sense to extend? I also do a lot of career counseling for people who want to switch careers. I think the notion of brand equity extension can be applied to individuals. I do a lot of career advising. People come to me for advice very often when they're switching careers. And I have them put themselves at the center of a chart and spokes coming out with the different aspects that they're great at. It might be team building. It might be analysis. It might be creative. But what are those brand equity elements of you as an individual, and which of those can you leverage into different industries? What industries have the need for those types of skill sets? So I think this works for brands, and I think it works for individuals.
I want to dive into a little bit of the backstory that you have. So you've worked both on the agency side, you've also worked on the client side. And, that's one of the things that a lot of agencies are really focused in on is how do I deliver better service to the client? How do I grow the relationship with the client? What are the things that matter to the client? And I'm not talking about the creative output, right? I'm just talking about the relationship that you have with the client. And I'd be interested to hear some of your thoughts about, how I might apply innovation to that client agency relationship, the management of that relationship, and what some of the thoughts you might have about how I could work to improve that.
Well, I'm sure you've heard in many different contexts the notion of surprising and delighting your customer. I saw it on Kingfisher Airline in India. They gave a questionnaire. The end of the questionnaire was, did we surprise and delight you? Mandarin Oriental, Ritz-Carlton, they all try to surprise and delight customers. And I think as an agency, you can try and surprise and delight your customers. Give them something that they didn't ask for, but that they really need, that shows that you are a business partner, you understand their issues, and that you have good ideas. And sometimes if you volunteer things that they didn't ask for, if you're very proactive, it shows that you listened and that you're smart and that you've got good ideas to bear. So I think, I remember when I was on the agency side, creatives always had to deliver against strategy. The most insulting thing that as a client you could ever say to an agency was that something was off strategy. But sometimes agencies had better ideas, or maybe they had other strategic ideas, and they could come, as long as they delivered on the strategy part, they could bring other ideas to the clients. And I think clients love that. They love, they can't think of everything. It's such a struggle to resonate with consumers and break through the clutter that if you as an agency can bring new ideas, even if it's not exactly in the bailiwick, you become a really value-added partner.
So Michelle, our time is running short, but before we end, I really have this question for you. You mentioned a number of times in your book that you have 63 different categories of innovation. And I'm just surprised and interested to hear, how did you arrive at 63 categories? It seems pretty detailed.
It does. I spent years traveling around the world taking pictures of things that I thought were innovative, and I defined that as things I had never seen in a category before. And I looked at size innovation, for example. Coca-Cola created a very small can, and that was innovation based just on size alone. Or Ralph Lauren changed the size of the logo, and there was a big logo on the front, and then at the US Open, there was a massive logo on the back. That created a whole new product line. Desigual, the clothing company, they're based on asymmetry. And I noticed buildings that were asymmetrical and print ads that were asymmetrical. And I just looked at what was the one big idea that made this product unique. And I collected them and I saw patterns of grouping. It could be materials, it could be price point, it could be reversing things sometimes. I don't know, just saw a lot of patterns emerging, but I saw them emerging across
the world and across sectors. And part of the fun of my book is how you can see that one dimension can be used in art context. I've gone to art galleries and found fabulous innovation in materials, in technology, et cetera. And how can one idea like color or price or process or business model is one of my favorite chapters. Analogies is another wonderful area. There's a material in hospitals. They found biomimicry is another. There's learning from nature. There's an industrial design firm in Germany called Festo, and their engineers hang out at the zoo, the Stuttgart Zoo. And they created a piece of equipment for factories that's modeled on an elephant's trunk because it's strong and it's very flexible. So you can get your inspirations from anywhere. So, and it can be customer touch point is another favorite of my chapters. There are MRI machines for kids that are made into rocket ships and pirate ships, and kids get comic books before they go into the MRI that they talk about they're going on an adventure, and they're calm, they don't need to be sedated, and they've got a whole different view of the experience. And that's an example of customer touchpoint innovation. So I just been collecting them and organizing them, and basically because I've seen patterns.
Right. Well, Michelle, on that note, we're gonna draw to a close, and I want to just start off by saying I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through this and share your insights and thoughts around innovation. If our listeners want to reach out to you for more information or have a question, is there a way that you would suggest they try to do so?
Yeah, sure. I think they can reach me through LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest.
Okay. Well, that is pretty easy. So thanks again, Michelle. Really appreciate your time today. And to our listeners, I want to say thank you. We always enjoy your comments that you send me. If you want to reach me, I'm at @alankshire on Twitter. Please listen to our back catalog. We have those available on Stitcher and SoundCloud and iTunes. And if you like it, let us know and share it with friends. We look forward to having you join us for another episode of What I Wish I'd Known.